Jesus was on a journey across the Sea of Galilee with his disciples when a scene that defied common understanding unfolded before them. After calming a storm that had almost led them to shipwreck, he came ashore where two men possessed by demons confronted him. These men lived among the tombs, a dark and feared place by the population. The violence they exuded was so great that no one dared to pass by. This moment marked not just a physical confrontation, but a spiritual battle where Jesus, through his presence, made it clear who held the true power. What many do not realize, however, is that this scene was not limited to just a fight for control of those men's bodies. What was at stake here was Jesus' authority over the spiritual realm. The demons, recognizing who stood before them, immediately bowed down. Imagine the impact of this scene. Feared and violent beings, who no one could control, being instantly subdued by the mere presence of Jesus. This power to dominate such destructive forces was already hinting at something much greater, a reality that Jesus was about to fully reveal. No one could ignore what was about to happen. The atmosphere was filled with tension, not just because of the presence of the demons, but because of what was to come. The fact that these possessed men bowed down, even in their rebellion, showed how much the spiritual realm recognized Jesus. There, an even more extraordinary event was beginning to take shape, one that would involve nature, animals, and human logic itself. What would come next? Let's follow the sequence of this episode. The demons, already feeling the weight of Jesus' authority, made an unusual request. Instead of being cast into the abyss as they deserved, they begged to be sent into a herd of pigs grazing nearby. Apparently a curious choice, right? Why would they ask for something like that? What was behind this request? Well, they knew their time of destruction had not yet come, and perhaps they thought that by entering the pigs, they could avoid immediate judgment. However, Jesus, in his wisdom, allowed the request. What seemed like just a whim of the demons was actually an opportunity for Jesus to demonstrate that nothing was beyond his control. Now think about it. This choice to be sent into the pigs was not random. The region where they were was inhabited by Gentiles, a people who did not share the same dietary laws as the Jews, who considered pigs unclean. The demons' choice to take refuge in something so impure served as a powerful metaphor for their own condition. Spiritually filthy beings, always seeking where they could cause more destruction. However, even with this attempt to escape their fate, the story was far from over. The demons had no idea that Jesus' permission would bring even more drastic consequences for them. And so upon receiving permission, the demons immediately left the possessed men and entered the pigs. One might have imagined that the herd would continue its day normally, but something unexpected happened. Once possessed, the pigs went mad, ran uncontrollably down a steep cliff, and plunged into the sea where they drowned. Here, the destruction the demons sought to avoid materialized in an even more impactful way. An entire herd was lost within minutes. But what would happen next? How would the people of that region react upon seeing such a disaster unfold in their own territory? What happened to the pigs was devastating, but also deeply symbolic. About 2,000 pigs in a matter of minutes ran frantically and hurled themselves into the sea, where they met their end. It doesn't take much to realize the economic impact this caused in the region. Losing a herd of that size meant a severe blow to the local economy, but for Jesus, the focus was far beyond earthly economy. This tragic scene highlighted the destructive nature of demons. The power they exerted over those pigs was a reflection of the chaos they bring to whatever they touch. And the quick and massive loss of the animals was just a glimpse of their fury. This frantic run of the pigs also gives us a deeper insight into what it means to be possessed by evil forces. The pigs, irrational creatures, could not resist the pressure of the demons, and this led to their self-destruction. It is a clear picture of how evil acts in people's lives. It may enter disguised, making seemingly simple requests, but its ultimate intention is always destruction. And what about the people who watched all of this from afar? While the animals drowned, the people of the region began to realize the extent of what had just happened. A crisis was looming, not only financial but spiritual. What no one expected, however, was the reaction of the people. Instead of focusing on the miracle of the two men's liberation, they turned to the loss of the pigs. The economy spoke louder to them. Rather than celebrating the deliverance and recognizing Jesus' power, they asked him to leave their land. Curious, isn't it? The spiritual liberation was underestimated in light of concern over the economic loss. Thus, Jesus prepared to leave, but the impact of his presence was far from over. The fact that this event occurred in Gentile territory brings a series of important layers to the narrative. At that time, Gentiles were seen as impure by the Jews, especially because they had habits and customs that went against the law of Moses, such as raising pigs. The presence of pigs in this territory, therefore, already carried a strong symbolism, marking a cultural and religious separation between Jews and Gentiles. By performing such a significant miracle in this place, Jesus was, in a way, beginning to break down that barrier. He demonstrated that his mission of redemption was not exclusive to the Jews but encompassed all peoples. This action by Jesus, liberating the possessed men in Gentile territory, signaled the beginning of a new era. It was a foreshadowing that salvation would be extended to all, without distinction of ethnicity, culture, or religion. And the Gentiles, who were traditionally kept away from Jewish fellowship, now had the opportunity to witness Jesus' transformative power. However, their reaction, in asking Jesus to leave, reveals a deep issue. When divine truth comes into contact with realities that people are not ready to change, fear and rejection can often, but you see, this departure of Jesus was not final. Quite the opposite. Even in the face of the people's rejection, the impact of his visit would continue to echo in that region. The two men freed from demons represented a transformation that no one could ignore. And even without Jesus' physical presence, the seeds of change were already planted. The remaining question is, how would this spiritual transformation affect the lives of the people from then on? After the extraordinary event of the liberation, the reaction of the people was surprising and, in a way, sad. Instead of celebrating the liberation of the two men who had been tormented for so long, the people focused on the loss of their pigs. This request for Jesus to leave reveals a harsh reality about people's priorities. Often, the economy, personal comfort, or fear of change speaks louder than spiritual well-being. It's as if they were saying, "We prefer to keep our businesses intact, even if it means continuing to live with evil." A choice that, unfortunately, echoes in many situations to this day. The request for Jesus to leave reveals a clear choice between the material and the spiritual. The people of that region opted to prioritize their economy, their business, rather than recognize the transformative power that was right in front of them. This attitude makes us reflect on how often we act in a similar way. How many times do we place material value ahead of our spiritual well-being? Think about how many decisions are made daily based solely on financial gain, ignoring the consequences for the soul and spirit. Still, Jesus, in his patience, respected the people's choice. He doesn't force his presence where he is not welcome. However, the liberation of the two possessed men had already occurred, and that was something they could never erase. Even with Jesus' departure, the impact of his action would remain. And that is the true beauty of spiritual transformation. It can happen quietly, but it leaves deep and lasting marks. The people who witnessed this miracle would now have to deal with the consequences of their choice. A miracle was rejected in exchange for material stability. What would come next? Jesus' authority over both the spiritual and natural worlds is clearly revealed in the episode where he confronts the demons possessing the two men. First, he had calmed a storm at sea, demonstrating his control over the forces of nature. Immediately afterward, upon meeting the possessed men, the mere presence of Jesus caused the demons to bow before him. These evil spirits not only recognized him as the Son of God, but also knew that he had the power to judge them. This reveals that Jesus was not just a figure of authority in the physical world, but had complete command over the spiritual realm. The fact that the demons begged him to be sent into the pigs instead of the abyss shows that they understood the limits of their own authority in front of Jesus. Even as destructive and chaotic forces, the demons were subject to Jesus' word, confirming that he held absolute power over them. Jesus' permission for the demons to enter the pigs also reveals that his control extended beyond the spiritual realm to all creatures and beings on earth. With a simple go, he altered the course of events that involve spiritual forces, nature, and even the everyday lives of those people. This demonstration of authority over both the spiritual and natural realms points to the essence of the kingdom that Jesus brought. a kingdom where the physical and spiritual were not separated. Everything was under his sovereignty. He was not only the master of the winds and the waters, but also the Lord of spirits. The scene of the confrontation with the demons reinforces that, even though evil exists and seeks to destroy, it is always under the control and authority of Christ. This truth has profound implications for how we understand God's power in our daily lives, both in the visible and invisible realms. The reaction of the people in the region to the liberation of the two possessed men reveals a clear and unfortunately common choice: the priority of material goods over spiritual well-being. When the pigs ran down the hill and drowned, the economic impact was immediate. For that community, which relied on pigs as a source of income, losing a herd of 2,000 animals represented a significant loss. Even in the face of such a notable miracle, where men who had lived tormented for years were freed from demonic forces, the people's first concern was the financial cost of the situation. It's a matter of values. For them, material well-being outweighed the spiritual freedom that had just occurred. This reaction is not hard to understand when we reflect on how often people prioritize what gives them financial security. In many cases, the fear of losing what one has, whether in property, money, or status, can obscure the perception of something greater, something spiritual. They were so used to the presence of evil in their community that they preferred to endure it rather than lose what they considered essential for their economic survival. This kind of mentality, to prefer to keep things as they are in order not to compromise gain, is a dilemma we still face today in various areas of life. The people's choice to ask Jesus to leave was not just a request to dismiss a man who had performed a miracle, but rather an attempt to keep their world intact without major changes. They preferred the security of a system that involved profitable businesses and predictable routines, even if it meant continuing to live with destructive forces. What this passage shows us is that, often when confronted with the opportunity for profound transformation, people opt for what gives them immediate comfort, even if it means rejecting the path that would lead to true spiritual change. Still, Jesus, in his patience, respected the people's choice. He doesn't force his presence where he is not welcome. However, the liberation of the two possessed men had already occurred, and that was something they could never erase. Even with Jesus' departure, the impact of his action would remain. And that is the true beauty of spiritual transformation. It can happen quietly, but it leaves deep and lasting marks. The people who witnessed this miracle would now have to deal with the consequences of their choice. A miracle was rejected in exchange for material stability. What would come next? The authority of Jesus over both the spiritual and natural realms is further highlighted by the events that followed. In the narrative, Jesus is shown as having complete control over the forces of nature when he calmed the storm at sea, a powerful demonstration of his command over creation. This act alone was awe-inspiring to his disciples. However, the subsequent encounter with the demoniacs deepened their understanding of his dominion. The fact that the demons immediately recognized and submitted to him, the demons' plea to be sent into the pigs instead of being cast into the abyss, is another profound detail. This shows that even these chaotic spiritual forces are limited by divine authority. They feared the consequences of being sent to their ultimate punishment and sought refuge in the pigs as a temporary escape. By granting their request, Jesus illustrated his sovereign control, knowing that their destructive nature would still lead to a self-defeating outcome. The demons' decision to inhabit unclean animals like pigs symbolized their own impurity, and their fate demonstrated that evil, no matter how cunning, ultimately leads to destruction. This event serves as a powerful metaphor for the broader spiritual truths Jesus was teaching. The pig's self-destruction reflects how the forces of evil are inherently destructive and seek to drag down anything they touch. For the people who witnessed this, the immediate concern was not the spiritual liberation of the two men, but the economic loss of their herd. This choice to value wealth over a miraculous act of deliverance reveals a deep truth about human priorities and the conflict between materialism and spiritual enlightenment. The townspeople's request for Jesus to leave underscored their unwillingness to face the deeper implications of what they had just witnessed.